Number 3 is Doom Eternal. Already I'm starting with controversy. A lot of you are getting upset. It's like, how can you say Doom Eternal is a bad game? That's because you lack reading comprehension. You did not look at the title. It's not about if it's a good or a bad game. It's whether or not the game was disappointing. And Doom Eternal definitely was disappointing because we expected more. We wanted more. We demand more from a franchise like Doom. The first reboot, which came out a couple of years ago, was great. People loved it. And now it set the bar. And this Doom Eternal did not pass that bar. In fact, it remained exactly where the bar is. If you look at the story of the game, it's not really that great. The developers actually expect you to read that entire freaking library of lore, which has all of these weird names, and they expect that you're already familiar somehow with the universe in order to make some goddamn sense of what's going on in there. And it's not only that, the story doesn't have any linear progression, nor does it have for a satisfying conclusion. When you start the game, you're already killing a Hell Priest. Like, well, why am I doing there? Why am I doing this? I just finished the tutorial. Why am I killing this powerful entity? Didn't I just get trapped by Samuel Hayden, the previous game? What is going on? And the thing that is disappointing is that the game actually does have some good story. And it's very interesting, but it requires you to get into it, which is why I even made a video on this channel for people that want to know more about the lore in this game, but the delivery falls flat. Now, I know what you're saying. It's like, well, maybe this shouldn't be a story game. I mean, you just run around with guns and shoot monsters and you're having fun, right? Well, yeah, kinda, sorta, I guess, but that's what you did in the previous game, and that's why I'm saying it doesn't manage to raise the bar. It keeps the bar at the same level. Like, one of the things that it could have done, and it would have made the game so much cooler that you would probably even play it now, would have been to make a decent multiplayer. I don't understand why the developers just flat out refuse to make a arena-based shooter like in the good old days. I mean, like Quake Arena. They have the engine. They have the graphics. They can literally just do it. Like, just do it. But instead, no, they refuse. They make the multiplayer so bizarre where you get to play demons and you're allying with another demon against the Slayer. Why you do that? Why you do that? Just like have a normal deathmatch where you just run around in the arena like the warrior that you are. You're picking up power-ups and you're picking up weapons and you're shooting other people. Why is that so hard to do in 2020? God damn it. Now, if you disagree with my choice for the number 3 of the most disappointing game in 2020, you might agree with the second one, Resident Evil 3 Remake. Now, this is an absolute abomination that has the shame to call itself a video game. Does two things and they do it well. Number 1 is to be a shameless cash grab, to take away your money and give very little entertainment in return. And number 2 is to show how it can ruin the goodwill of a company that worked so hard to create it by releasing the previous title, which was Resident Evil 2 Remake. Now, that game actually raises the standards of the entire industry when it comes to how to accurately make remakes. The game has an actual horror atmosphere. It returns to the roots of the original. The fact that it changes the way the camera functions and it's a completely different game makes it absolutely amazing. I loved playing Resident Evil 2. It was one of the favorite games that I had that year. However, Resident Evil 3 does none of the things. You see, not only is the game incredibly short that you can actually finish it within 4 hours of gameplay, even less if you decide to not spend time exploring or reading the lore or playing it on an easier difficulty level, but they even remove, you don't get to explore the clock tower, you don't get to explore the park, you don't get to have multiple endings, you don't get to have the choices that you used to have in the previous Resident Evil 3. All of that is gone. And then you watch how they shamelessly marketed that game. They were constantly going on how they made the Nemesis more fearsome, on how they improved their AI in order to make it look like Mr. X from Resident Evil 2. Which, by the way, was one of the greatest additions to the game that added a lot to the horror element. So, when you look at the marketing and then you play the actual game, you notice that the Nemesis barely appears at all. In fact, there's like only one time when it actually chases you, and you can say that it's quote-unquote unscripted. But the rest of the time, it just pops up where you most expect him to pop up, and it's just a boss battle. You put some bullets into him, and then you move on. And he's such a pushover as well, considering that the main character now has access to this interesting ability that looks like Kronos, master of all time, had sex with Neo from the Matrix, and gave this abomination to Jill. She can now have a dodge mechanic which stops time, making the game an absolute cakewalk once you master it. And Jill is also not a likable character. They went out of their way to desexualize her. The developers actually said so in many interviews. I don't know really why, but like they had to dress her all the way up, which is fine, because you can mod that, but she now curses every single step of the way like a rebellious teenager, trying to show to the other kids how cool she is because she can have a potty mouth while mommy and daddy isn't there. It's just an unlikable addition to the character, in my opinion, and the previous Jill was perfect. I don't know why they had to change it or who demanded this change, but I hope those people are happy and purchase 20 copies of the game in order to support this very savvy business decision. So, you know, overall, I'm a little bit skeptical now of Resident Evil 7. And if that game doesn't sell well, then Resident Evil 4 might also be affected by the sales. And yes, you heard that right. They are going to do a Resident Evil 4 remake. Why? I don't know. The game is not even that old. You can still buy it on PlayStation 4. You can play it now if you want. The graphics are acceptable. They could have chosen Codename Veronica or Resident Evil 0 to remake, but, well, we're going to get Resident Evil 4. But enough about Capcom. Let's give some honorable mentions of games that should have been on the list but aren't here. Miles Morales Spider-Man. Now, I know this is called the most disappointing games of 2020, so in order to be disappointed by something, you have to have some expectations. You have to be a little bit hyped up before you can say you're disappointed. Which is why I'm not going to include Miles Morales on the list. But given the sales, it managed to plummet. I mean, the game barely sold at all. It might have gotten 3 times the number of copies sold if video game journalists would actually pay for their product rather than get them for free. And by the way, they were absolutely livid because people didn't buy this game, as if it's some cultural statement that people need to use their hard-earned money in order to prove that they're supporting progressive games or some shit. I don't know. But overall, the reason it didn't do well is because, well, it added almost nothing to the original. And the original was really, really fun the first 2 hours you play it. If you play it more than 2 hours, it gets repetitive and it starts getting boring and stale. So probably that's why a lot of people didn't decide to buy it. And another honorable mention goes, of course, to Cyberpunk, the most hyped up game in history. And of course, it was not going to go with the hype. No game that can be created by mankind will ever meet the hype that Cyberpunk used to have. And it got delayed again and again. But that's not even the issue. The issue is that while the game seems to be good and somewhat enjoyable on PC, it was unplayable on the PlayStation 4. So anyone that had the misfortune to buy it eventually was allowed a refund because the game was so broken that they decided to pull it out and they promised they will fix it before putting it back in again. So if you're a Cyberpunk fan, well, you know, tough luck. Go play it on the PC like normal people. Now, finally, the most disappointing game of 2020, in my opinion, and actually, it's not even my opinion, it's just objective at this point, is The Last of Us 2. And despite all of the fellatio that video game journalists gave over this, and they were bending over backwards to say that this is the greatest gift to humankind ever made, go watch whatever streamer you want who actually played this game. This game is such a universal disappointment that I don't even need to give you the names of streamers. You go and pick for yourself. You go and find out whomever you want and you will see that the person didn't like the game. They were massively disappointed by it. And there are several reasons for it. Number one, it takes around 2 hours before you can even start playing the game. It's a massive cutscene to the level that even Kojima wouldn't have the audacity to make people wait so much until they finally get to play. And you know what? At least Kojima has good games. And after you suffer and you stomach through that cutscenes like a champ, you finally get to play the game. Not in this case, though. No, like, when you actually do start to get to play the game, you wish you never did. From bad jokes such as bigoted sandwiches, to sex scenes where you wish you would rather watch Medusa fucking because at least you get to turn into stone and your suffering ends right there and then, and you don't have to live with the scar that has been etched on your brain from seeing that. And that's just scratching the surface. As you move on, you find out that progressive feminist Neil Druckmann, who managed to kick one of the best women responsible for uplifting the video game industry, Amy Hennig, creator of games such as Soul Reaver and Uncharted, Well, Druckmann is going to now grandstand of what a good progressive he is and how he wants to get women into more positions of power after climbing that corporate ladder and pushing the woman on top of him in order to make room for his position. And then the controversy keeps going. Apparently, the levels of crunch going around and the massive turnover rate from the developers that couldn't take the abuse from that godforsaken company caused massive scandals and spoilers to leak over the internet, which got the company to start falsely DMCAing everyone on Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube for showing the story of the game. Because they knew the story was just awful. They knew that the story is just meant to spite gamers. But the only catch was that gamers were supposed to find out about the story after they paid the full price for the game. And here we go to the disappointment aspect of it. Because the game does have moments where it actually shines. The graphics are really good and the gameplay isn't really bad. I love the stealth aspect and I enjoyed just being able to sneak around and putting an arrow in an enemy's head. And most importantly, the hospital scene where you get to find that massive zombie is actually really cool and likable. But it's very difficult to have fun when you're interrupted by jokes such as bigoted sandwiches or sex scenes with Neil Druckmann's self-insert, which if I didn't know any better looks to me like a sponsored content for Gillette razors. And then when you look at the marketing, it adds more insult to injury. I am so tired of the way video games and movies advertise their products nowadays. Especially when they know they have a mediocre or a bad product that cannot stand on its own. They like to claim that they're actually fighting for social justice, that the product is actually there to break down doors and kick in windows, and they're pushing mankind to newer heights of enlightenment. You see, this game has the first non-binary character ever made in a AAA series. And people who do not want to buy the game, it's not because they don't like it or they're not attracted to the story. No. It's 100% because they are transphobic. We have used Cerebro in order to mind read them, and we know that this is the case. And if you're a progressive person, what you need to do is you need to buy the game. Buy as many copies because this is going to make those transphobes upset. Yeah, these marketing campaigns are not only insulting for the gaming community, but they constantly just hide the fact that the games are broken, buggy, or simply put, not enjoyable or mediocre. And for now, it seems that the video game journalists, especially when giving awards, they're not interested if a game is actually good or it has interesting gameplay or makes people stick to it. No, it's all about the message. And if you're caring about the message so much, either go into fucking politics or at least write a book. This is not the medium to send a message. This is a medium that prizes immersion about everything else. And if it's a game, then it needs to have gameplay. Feel better after getting that off my chest. So this is the list of the most disappointments of this year. And I was actually surprised when making it because I found out that this year didn't have that many disappointments. Well, it didn't have that many games to begin with, but there are a lot more better games, and I'll probably make another video where I talk about the ones that were great. And I can even make a top 10 or a top 5 video because there's so many and it's going to be more difficult to choose from. All in all, 2020 was not such a bad year for the video gaming industry when you look at titles such as Wasteland 3, Gears of War Tactics, and many others. But again, I'll make a video about that. In the meantime, let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the comment sections.